make things possible in the virtual world. Oh, we do appreciate it so much. Okay, teams in the architecture. So it's really interesting how Microsoft 365 is evolving the landscape of our information architecture. I work at a company called Pate Group, and we have these conversations probably weekly at a minimum of what architecture means now. And I have started identifying myself as an architecture geek. I really find myself being drawn to this conversation because there can be confusion, there can be frustration. It feels like Microsoft 365 starts to present so many options, it can be hard to figure out how everything comes in together. So that's what we're going to talk through today. Please, please, please feel free to chime into the chat with questions. Our amazing project manager slash moderator extraordinaire is going to help us keep an eye on that. Thank you again. I appreciate your help. If we've never met before, virtually or face-to-face, I am Joy Apple. On social media, I'm Joy of SharePoint. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a modern workplace strategist. And what that means is I help folks figure out how to get from where they are today. Maybe that is still working off of a file share. I have lots of folks that I'm helping them figure out how to go from nested folders into modern architecture. Maybe it's legacy versions of SharePoint, such as, it hurts my heart to say any part of SharePoint's legacy. We've been with it for so long, but maybe 2007, 2010, 2013, 16. We've got all those great on-prem farms out there, but it's time to start modernizing those and moving those into the cloud. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to get that ball rolling with Teams and SharePoint. I've been working in this space for over 12 years now, but the last 6 years I've been focusing very intently on Microsoft 365. So let's talk about architecture. Moss, hey, I see you in chat. Moss, near and dear to my heart. Sorry, I have a little squirrel situation going on when I see comments in chat. Okay, modern architecture. It's not just SharePoint sites anymore. And it's never been just one thing. Even if we were working off of a file share, we would have to kind of step back and look at how employees worked on their desktop machines and their file shares and any other servers that might have documents and storage. It's always been a multi-level thing. But since the advent of SharePoint, Microsoft Office SharePoint Services, our friend Moss, it's started to evolve in such a way that we think about information architecture. We tend to think SharePoint because that, if we've embraced it fully, is our centralized location for document management. That doesn't sound boring at all, right? But that's where we create our documents, where our documents live, where they evolve, where they grow. And now, for the last 4 years, here comes this new kid on the block called Teams. And Teams is beginning to play a very centralized, prominent role in this information architecture. I will confess to you, when Microsoft announced Teams, I did probably an audible eye roll. I'm so sorry. I feel like I should hide my face and be so ashamed. I'm a little ashamed because in my mind, did the world really need one more chat-based tool? No, it didn't. When I opened up Teams for the first time and I saw that Files tab sitting there, I almost lost my mind because, oh, not alone, good to know. Did the world really need another place to put stuff? I actually got really angry because I just reacted. I didn't investigate. I saw Files. I saw Microsoft. I thought I saw Microsoft telling people, hey, you can put stuff here now too. Now you can put stuff in SharePoint, you can put stuff in OneDrive, and you can put stuff in Teams. It's going to be chaos. That was my thought until I got in there and started looking at it. So we'll keep moving on. So what the heck is Teams and why should I care, right? That's the unspoken sentiment for this slide. Teams is a chat-based communication platform. Heart and soul, chat-based communication platform, a collaboration hub. Hub almost feels like a buzzword these days, but it's 5,000% true for Teams. It gives us a place to centralize around the work we do with our teams. So not necessarily our centralized file management tool, sort of, we'll talk about it, but it's a collaboration hub where we centralize our teamwork. It's absolutely a place to have our meetings, our calls, our one-on-one. I love that I can be chatting with a coworker inside of Teams, and you know how you're typing and finally you're just tired. You're like, I can't continue to type this conversation. Can I just call you? And you go straight from chat-based communication to voice or video. But there's a lot of other stuff in there too that we can look at. When we start looking at our teams, we got two types basically: public teams and private teams. A public team, when it's created, it's not locked down to only that membership of the group where someone has to be explicitly invited in. A public team can be joined by anyone in the organization. You know, when you're in your teams, team will poke at the button in a minute and you see join or create team, or if your organization has it where only certain people can create teams, you'll just see join a team. You can go search and find those public teams. You can go be a part of those conversations. Then the more traditional, I feel, team type is the private. I create a team, I tell teams I want it to be private, and only the people that I put in that Microsoft 365 group have access to it as either an owner or a member. We can have guests, but guests are probably going to also be members. There's not technically a read-only out-of-the-box function for teams. My new saying these days is if you're in the team, you're on the team. If you're on the team, you're a team member. And team members can add, edit, contribute, can do stuff. Otherwise, why are we here? Because we're supposed to be here to work. And if you're just reading, you're not really working, maybe. What we see when we first step into a team, the obvious stuff. We see posts. It used to be called chat, but I think they agreed with the user voice about, am I chatting in my teams or am I chatting in chat? So they changed it to post. We see that files tab, which is what almost, I'm Southern, so I'm going to say it almost had me pitch a conniption fit when I saw that first time. And we see that plus sign where we can add additional teams. Let me flip around a little bit here. I want to show my taskbar. I'm going to go to Teams. Oh, somebody in California is trying to call me. That's fun. So where am I? Let me go into my HR team. Let me go. Anybody else do that? You click on the title of your team to go into your team, even though you know that doesn't take you into your team. So if I go to the general tab, I look across the top, there's that posts where we have conversations with our team. No matter which channel in my team, this is more default, right? I see files, I see wiki. If the wiki bugs you, you can absolutely rename it to something else. I see some folks rename it to channel notes. I like that. That feels a little bit more descriptive than wiki. If you'd rather add the OneNote notebook that's created with this, you can remove now the wiki tab. You didn't used to be able to, but now you can. And you can add other tabs. We're going to talk more about tabs in a little bit, but I think it's boring to stay in slides all the time. So I thought we'd come in here and click around just a little bit. Okay, so that's what we see when we come in here to our teams. And here's that join or create team at the very bottom. Or if there were public teams out here, hey, there's a fun team. I'm not a member of it. It's open for everyone. I could click that button and join it. The test 333 team looks boring, so I'm just going to leave that one alone, right? So this is how I can find those teams and jump in and be part of the conversation and the collaboration. This is what we see at the heart of teams when we jump in. But what we don't see is that membership service, that Microsoft 365 group. Because when I create that team, it's creating a group, and everyone that I say in my team is a member or an owner gets added to that group, which is magic. Because anybody here, feel free to go into chat. That's awesome. Anyone here used to have to manage like lots of disparate AD groups, right? You'd have to add them to this group and then go add to that group and then add the group to the SharePoint group. And it was like you spent all of your time just working with permissions management. This Microsoft 365 group is a security service Thank you, Microsoft. It lets me do one-stop shopping. So now as this team is being created, this membership service group is being created, I'm getting also in the background a SharePoint site, which we don't see when we look at our team. We're getting stuff in Outlook. We're getting a group inbox and a shared calendar. We're getting a planner plan. Oh, I don't have it on here. We're getting a OneNote notebook. So all these things are being created behind the scenes when we create that team. For some of you, this is old news. For some of you, this might be new news. We get a little jaded when we work with this stuff day in and day out. But I actually had a conversation on Wednesday with some folks that said, wait. You're telling me for every team I have out there, there's also a SharePoint site? Yep, sure enough is. Sure enough is. Because Teams really only does a few things all by itself. Just a few. Chat, meetings, and calling. You can maybe squint your eyes a little bit and go, oh, meetings and calling is kind of the same thing. Nah, potato, right? A lot of what Teams does, it's handing off to other applications. It's partnering with them to become that hub, right? One app couldn't do it all. Anyone remember back in the days when they tried to make SharePoint do it all? And it was kind of difficult to manage with all of those service applications that kind of got looped into it. So that's all the stuff that Teams is. Teams is not a file management tool. And this is where we have to sit there and go, but I go to files and I put my files in files. So it's holding my files. Is it? Back to the screen. Back to the show taskbar. I wish that would just stay up there. I really do. Okay. I'm going to go to General for my HR team. I go to Files. Did you know too, there's a few different ways you can get to your SharePoint site. You can go to Files. Wait for it, and it just shows for half a second on my little bitty monitor. And then when you click that magic ellipsis, I can say open in SharePoint. And that's the moment when people go, oh. That's when I calm down having that first conniption fit. And I was like, oh, okay. It really is just handing this back to SharePoint. Okay, I'm fine now. I'm sorry for all the words I said, Microsoft. You can also get into your SharePoint site if you just, from any channel, if you go to the ellipsis that's way over there underneath like your face or your initials, it gives you that ability there to also open in SharePoint. It's going to dump you into the general channel. There's my documents, and there's all of my folders that were created when I did my channels, right? So we've got good stuff happening here. It's pretty nice. It's staying organized. We can maybe have a rant session if we have time at the end to complain about the fact that it's folders, not libraries, but that's outside the scope of today's conversation. I have opinions. So SharePoint is the piece in our information architecture, has been for a long time for those of us that have been working with SharePoint for a while, but it's the partner architecture that manages our stuff. We've got lots of stuff, right? We've got terabytes of stuff. Some of it's on communication sites. Some of it's in team sites tied to Teams. Some of it might be inside of our OneDrive, but there's stuff everywhere. So when I'm sharing files inside of a team, that's going to be inside of my SharePoint team site. So team site with Teams. If I'm sharing it one-on-one or group chat, that's going to be in OneDrive, which is basically baby SharePoint anyway. So if I share with you in chat, it's in my OneDrive. You have a link that gives you permissions to do whatever I said you could do. If you share with me, it's in your OneDrive. Easy peasy, good stuff. But now let's go up higher and let's look down at that architecture. Ooh, that's wide. Can't hardly read it. I'll find my magnifying glass. Microsoft recommends avoiding subsites. So every site we're going to create now should be a standalone top-level site, regardless if that's our corporate home site, our HR communication site, or the HR functional areas. I'm going to pick on HR a lot today, in a good way, because HR has a lot of content in the world, right? They have a ton of stuff that everyone in the organization needs to be able to consume. to read, to submit a form, something like that. They've got content that they have to enable us to get to. That's where our communication sites come in. Communication sites do not have Microsoft 365 groups associated with them. They cannot be teamified. Right? They can't be connected to a team. It's not that kind of site. It's where a small group of people curate, manage, care, and feed documentation, and then they broadcast it out or communicate it out to the rest of the organization. But our departments, HR, IT, finance and accounting, safety, operations, they also have content that they have to work on away from the prying eyes of everybody else. Just imagine if HR put every piece of information that they manage on a site that everybody could get to. Laws would be broken. People would lose their minds, right? It's not appropriate. So we go to our tried and true team site to organize that content. Now with Teams, we tie Teams to that team site to enhance and streamline the communication and the collaborative process. Now we can go into Teams, open up a document, chat while we're working on it without having to have a meeting, right? If we're super ambitious, 25 of us could be co-authoring a document at the same time and having conversations. You can have that chat panel there and just work away. It's wonderful. Mark Rackley is one of the senior folks at Pate Group. I think I dotted line report to him in some way, but he calls Teams the gateway drug to SharePoint. Because if you get those folks, they're like, oh, no. I don't need a site. I don't need all this stuff. I just need a place to share files with my coworkers. Stick it in Teams. If they don't want to, if they're not ready to use that team site, they don't have to. But it starts to give us a fully baked out intranet where we have the company public content organized on communication sites, and then that department private content organized on team sites. Now let's look at this for just a minute. I'll get out of my share. It does get wide, right? But wide is good when it comes to architecture in SharePoint and Microsoft 365. I see everything that I'm working with. And to be honest, HR is probably going to have more than one team site because they've probably got more than one functional area that needs some security boundaries and some organization. So this HR section probably would scale out to 2 or 3 or more team sites with connected teams. So this architecture gets wider and wider and wider. But the security lives at the site level. So all kinds of good stuff comes along with this. I got a slide for it, so I don't want to give away the secret sauce yet. If you're coming from on-prem SharePoint, this can start to feel a little intimidating because those nested sites, I can't teamify a subsite. I can't. So if HR had one big site, team site, and then benefits was in a subsite, payroll was in a subsite, wellness was in a subsite, wellness can't get a team because it's a subsite. So I need to break that out, make it its own standalone site. This is a great time to look at those in the middle sites. Perhaps we're going to consolidate them. Perhaps we've got those old meeting workspaces that haven't been used in 5 years. Archive the content, get rid of those sites, clean up that architecture. When you unnest those sites, you're probably going to need to do some security reviews. That's probably going to be a very good thing. If a subsite was inheriting permissions from its parent site, when I go recreate that as a top level site, we know our SharePoint, there's going to get a brand new owners, members, and visitors set of groups there. We have to go through and identify who are the appropriate owners, who are the appropriate members, right? And then we can get that team site in there with the Microsoft 365 group, team, I said team site, team connected to the site, get the membership going, get the security in place, and just watch the collaboration just take off. Top level sites where Microsoft's focusing all this really good functionality. So it definitely behooves us, there's my fancy word of the day, it behooves us to unnest those sites. Don't panic, because once you start unnesting those sites from the administrative perspective, life gets easier. You now in the admin center know exactly how many sites you're working with. You don't have to guess or wonder or stay awake at night worrying about how many nested sites are under there, Those tangled up knots of permissions are gone because we're not breaking permissions at site levels. My team and my team site has their permissions and security in place, and they work, right? Because if you're in the team, you're on the team, so you're there to work. If we don't want people doing stuff, they probably don't need to be in the team. It really starts to simplify the permissions perspective. If you don't over nest folders, please don't. There's really good reasons not to deeply nest folders. There's really good reasons not to go more than 3 levels deep inside of your site. That's including your library, a folder, a subfolder. If you're not overusing nested folders, you're not going to hit those URL links that we used to hit, which is great for a variety of reasons. And if you're thinking, man, if I make every subsite its own standalone site, let's be real, you're going to lose some, right? They don't all still probably need to be there. That's a lot of sites. Am I going to run out of space? Am I going to run out of storage? You get 2 million site collections for top level sites now. So more than likely you're going to be fine for all your teams, for all your communication sites. It's pretty darn easy to buy new storage these days. Budget's a whole other thing. I'm not prepared to talk about budget for buying new space, but the infrastructure is absolutely there for you to be able to grow your architecture out in such a way that you can leverage teams and you're going to have your sites built out security first so you don't have those tangled up knots of broken permission. All right, teams is for teamwork and team sites are for collaboration. Before I jump into this, I'm going to bring up my HR team again. How are we doing? I kind of glanced at chat just a second ago. Anybody have any questions before we start really kind of tearing apart how to build out these teams? That's a chance for me to drink some coffee. Okay, we're rocking and rolling. I love it. So another reason I tend to go to HR as my guinea pig or my demo team is because HR, more than likely, it's going to need a lot of teams. Accounting, so I got my accounting, money, and finance team. They may as well. It depends on how many functional business areas your departments are going to break out into. I do see a question. Will you be including on-prem at all in this discussion? Since Teams doesn't really touch the on-prem world, not much. But I'm glad you asked that question. Are you guys okay if I call a timeout and just give a minute or two to talk about moving from on-prem? Let me do that for a second. If you are looking at moving from on-prem into this world, first thing to think to have a top of mind is, do we need to clean our room before we move? This hits a little too close to home because I moved last year. It was chaos. What should come over, what should not? I did an architecture panel with Sharon Weaver and Jay Leask the other day. And Sharon pointed out most of the time, 40% of the stuff that's on-prem or in a file share probably either needs to be archived or deleted. And that's a broad statement. And it's subject to your internal legal requirements to maintain data. But think about that. And then as you're coming from on-prem, again, evaluate your current architecture. Sit down with those business departments. Look at their subsites, look at their structure, look at their permissions, help them talk through it. It's a lengthy process, but it's definitely worth the time and the planning, because if I know for a fact that HR is having a fit because they've got broken security in between their sites, their subsites, they're not sure everybody has the right level of permission. They don't even know, who's got what where. It's time to talk about it. Sketch out what that architecture might look like. I use Xmind for doing this. This is an extremely simplified version, right? IT communication site, IT team site. But where does the security need to be? If you can architect your architecture according to permissions, you're going to have a cleaner build. So if you go back and look at what you've got on-prem, evaluate the security. Okay, you've got this folder inside of documents, and it's called policy revisions. But inside of the documents library on the team site, there's also a folder called PTO requests. Does it make sense that both of those types of data live in the same library? Personally, I would say no, probably not. Those maybe they seem like very different types of information. They should maybe have different libraries. Okay, do the same people that have the access to the PTO requests, should they also have that same level of permission to the policy revisions? Well, no, they're two different teams. We broke the permissions on the folder. So these people go to that folder, these people go to those. Okay, so to me, I know now I need a place for the audience that works on policy revisions and a separate place for the people that receive and process PTO requests. It's probably going to be two different sites if we want to work at the permissions best practice, right? We secure the largest object possible because the people doing those policy revisions are probably also doing other things around policies. That group probably does a lot of stuff. They can do that on their team site. Maybe they had 3 or 4 subsites in the past, and on-prem, they're working out 3 or 4 subsites. Can we consolidate those? Does it make sense from an organization security perspective? It's a lot of planning. You can absolutely lift and shift from on-prem into SharePoint Online. I don't recommend it because a lot of work should go into that cleanup. If we lift and shift content that's out of date, how many times do we go to look for, heck, I'll say policy again, a policy, and you find one that's like 10 years old? You know, that's not accurate anymore, right? If I lift and shift that into SharePoint Online, my Microsoft search is going to pull back results for stuff that's 10 years old. Now we're back to going, search, that's not very good. I don't like search. Why doesn't search work better? Why is it bringing this to me? Because we can clean it up. So there's a lot of things to think about. I hope you found that helpful, thinking from the architecture perspective. And that's actually going to pull me back in to thinking about how we architect our teams. Here, right, teams is for teamwork. So I'm going to create an HR team. And I see a lot of organizations go down this path. They create this HR team, and then they create a channel for the different areas of HR. And then they go, well, that's not going to work because, you know, the Alabama HR team, they've got things that they need to do that Ohio doesn't need to see the PII that's involved with Alabama employees and vice versa. So they might go down the path of making those as private channels. Well, now they can't use the planner plan. Now the OneNote notebook's not working. Now it's messy and I can't organize. So what's the best way to approach building out teams for our departments? Will one team work, or are we going to get ourselves kind of messed up and run into that thing of having too many private channels? I can't use what I want to use because when I create a private channel, we'll get to that, it takes you away from all the good stuff inside of your team. So you can absolutely have your HR team for all of HR come in here to talk. Hey, Alabama HR, there's a new announcement that Alabama's hiring process is going to change. Here's that piece of information, drop it in the HR channel, right? It gives the management of HR a way to communicate big things down to the whole HR team. It's awesome. They can all talk together, kind of get to know each other. Maybe they go super crazy and have an HR happy hour in the general channel once a quarter. But then we're also going to need some space where teams like the wellness group, the individual locations may need to be able to break off and have secure work spaces. So then we would come in to join or create a team. I like to start from teams when I create this. If you already have an existing team site, if it has a Microsoft 365 group and you go to create a team, you know, it'll ask you, are you starting from scratch or do you want to start from a group or team, right? I've got some templates here I could pick from. These are semi-new, right? And kind of get started with stuff. From scratch means I'm going to create a SharePoint site, planner plan, OneNote notebook, all those things we talked about. If I start from an existing group or team, I'm marrying it to an existing team site. I'm going to start from scratch. Here are my options. Do I want to create public private or org-wide. You can have, unless they've changed it recently, up to 5 organizational-wide teams in your organization. Everybody's already or automatically joined to it. I kind of call it the Hotel California of teams, because you get in there and you really can't leave unless you do something really bad and get kicked out by an admin. There's ways to moderate the conversation there. It's an option. I'm going to create this as private. Oh, I think I have a wellness. Let me see, I'm in Florida. So I'm going to create a Florida HR, not an HE. Typing's hard. HR team. Naming conventions are fun. I do find myself putting team in the name of a team. It's probably redundant. I do, for organizations, will standardize on a communication site. I'll spell out human resources. And then for the team side, I'll abbreviate it to HR, right? But talk through it, find out what makes sense for you and your organization. This is the private team. We don't always fill out descriptions, but it's one of the heaviest weighted pieces of metadata for search. So if you just throw a little bit in there, it will make this a little bit more findable, a heavier weight for search. I'm going to create this. Woohoo! Nice work. Thank you, teams. Now, behind the scenes, that SharePoint site's being spun up. This is a fake environment, so I'm just going to add good old trusty Bob the user. So my SharePoint site's being created. This group is being populated with members as I add them in. The planner plan, the group inbox, all that good stuff is happening. Did I not get Bob? Oh, there's Bob. Thank you. Yes, we're going to add Bob. Members, the default, which is nice, right? Safety first. But I could also elevate to owner as I go through here. Just whatever's appropriate for the people as you add. If you have an Active Directory group, an Azure AD group, you can absolutely add that here, right? That is possible. I'm going to go ahead and close. So now Florida has a private site that they can work from. They have their security maintained. It's away from the eyes and the access of everybody else in the organization, including the other HR teams. And it probably put it way down here at the bottom. Now, have you ever noticed that there's like very little rhyme or reason to how your teams in this section are organized? That's just so you can kind of put them in whatever order you want them to be. Personally, in my real teams, I hide almost everything because it auto-alphabetizes it, and I just pin the channels that are most important to me. That's how I work it. So now we've got a place for all of HR to communicate. If that is a need, it's there. If it's not, don't have to do it. And I can start to create a team for each of the functional areas, the security groups, the way the work breaks down for the rest of HR. And yeah, that'll start to get pretty wide. Wide is better because it's completely accessible in the admin center, both the teams and the SharePoint admin center. These are discoverable, findable. It's just a cleaner admin experience in general. I think I see something else in chat. You mentioned file share still being popular today. What do you recommend for those scenarios where they don't need to collaborate but just share files? Especially, ooh, I like this, especially externally with a partner or vendor. Is that just a SharePoint communication site? Teams seems overkill for some of those use cases. Okay, Jason, I'm going to give you a consultant answer. It depends. Okay, and I'm glad we're virtual because you can't throw anything at me. Do you want to be able to collaborate real time to talk? That's what we're saying. I'll just stop using the collaborate word. Do you want to be able to chat real time with that external person or group? If so, I've got clients that have guests in Teams so they can have that chat communication. I recommend caution, not necessarily from a security perspective, but an expectation perspective. Sometimes chat breaks down that kind of more professional boundary and there's an expectation. I mean, I know it's 8 o'clock at night, but it's just chat. Can't you just answer me? I know you see it on your phone, right? That could be a challenge. If you don't think that would be an issue, you could try it. Just share things in files. You just said no. Okay. So you don't want to talk. I don't want to talk to these people 24/7. Communication site. Absolutely. That's kind of my go-to, right? Because you're putting this information out for them to come get it. It's almost magical how easy it is these days to share with folks inside of Microsoft 365, right? You've got some boundaries around it. Every site is its own security boundary. So when I come here and I see /site/, right, those permissions aren't inherited anywhere else. They don't bleed over anywhere else. So if I build up that communication site, they can only live there. It's nice. Oh, we also considered a Yammer community to allow conversations that are separate from Teams, but not sure if that makes sense. You could, from the I'm flipping a coin in my head. I don't know if you can see like smoke coming out as I'm thinking through this. You could do that if it was, hey, here's something for you. Take it. I hope you like it. And it kind of brings a more social aspect to it. If it's more of a formal process, though, I would probably still go with the communication site. Yeah, instead of emailing it. I love, and this is actually on a slide later, I love that channels inside of Teams and lists and libraries inside of SharePoint give me the organization of that content. I hate to dig through my email for an attachment. Pet peeve. I'm not anti-email. We have to have it. But it keeps it cleaner and it gives you the ability to view it. You can control who can see what and do what if you share it through SharePoint. If I send you an attachment through email, I don't know what you do with that. Are you going to send that to Aunt Glenda? I don't know. I've got more control with who can do what with links if I share it from SharePoint. And I'm kind of a control freak, so I like that. So there are options, right? I feel like every time I talk about Microsoft 365, I say that phrase, there are options. Talk about it from the security perspective. Do we want this to be a more collaborative, live, real-time thing? Or am I just setting up a site with links, with resources, with news, with information, take people to their stuff? You know, you could use a flow or alerts to know when people are doing stuff. It's a good way to go. Oh yeah, you're very welcome. All right. Back to slides. Since Teams is for teamwork, right? Our traditional team site usage, if team sites are a traditional thing for you, but it's always been that department, group, project specific content, wellness, compensation, network, help desk. So we all had our little areas where we worked. Contract teams. Man, you get in there and you've got all your contracts with your expiration dates and your reminders. It's always happened inside of a team site. And we've always done it on the team sites because those are, well, used to be, that was the only kind of site we had, right? Even our publishing sites were team sites. But in the modern world, it's the more secure environment to work in, right? I can lock that down. And it's got more document management features automatically turned on than a communication site does. They're built for working. So it only makes sense that Teams ties to that inside of our information architecture and leverages that document management workhorse of the team site. When Teams first rolled out, there was a lot of conversation and discussion of, well, I know there's this team site here, but does it make sense to actually build that out? Does that replace what we used to do with our team sites? Absolutely. Teams comes in and owns the documents library, 100%, right? It comes in and it basically marries itself to this documents library. And every time I create a channel inside of my team, I get a folder inside of documents. Now, if I come here and I say new folder, don't, but I mean, you could, I just hope you wouldn't. Teams doesn't know about it. So I have seen situations like, well, we've got all this stuff in SharePoint, but Teams doesn't know anything about it. because Teams didn't do it. You need to start from Teams and put it over here. That said, I can come in here and open up my Alabama HR folder. I can drop stuff into this folder. I could upload, or I could create net new, and it will absolutely show up inside of the Files tab in the channel. But you have to start that creation process from the Teams side of the world to get the folder into Teams as a channel. One nice feature, if we maybe went down the path of building out some folders on the SharePoint side of the world, maybe you teamified the site later, or maybe somebody just got super excited and created a bunch of stuff on the SharePoint side. If you go to Teams and create a channel and name it the exact same thing, they will sync, which is nice. That's a nice feature. Where'd my slides go? Where'd my slides go? All right. So yeah, since we're already using team sites, or maybe we're investigating, if we've not moved there yet, using team sites for document organization and management, alerts in our workflows, our calendars, our shared calendars on our site, tie Teams to it, reduces duplication in the organization, right? If you've already got that team site, you can go teamify it. If you need a workspace, start from Teams and it'll build out all those other pieces for you. And as we start to use those two things together, the hashtag last year was better together, right? SharePoint and Teams are better together, but it really brings true meaning to the word collaboration. And this is kind of where I start to geek out a little bit, make sure I'm not missing anything in chat. So libraries are a thing of the past. Oh, no, we're getting there. We're getting there. Folders good again? No, Sarah, don't have a heart attack. Folders, we're friends here, right? We're all friends. I can say this. Folders are the F word in SharePoint. There, I said it. It feels good to say it. I try not to say it a lot. I really, really wish when you created a channel in Teams, it created a document library in the team site, because folders are nesting and we want to be flat, right? I can have unique metadata in libraries. I can't do that in a folder. I'm gritting my teeth now. So I have some wish list items. I wish, why didn't they? How come? I don't know the true story, but it's like acceptance is part of healing. So I'm accepting we have folders. If you have, oh, we'll just go to it. I'm probably gonna talk about this later. If you've got stuff in your team, like these completed benefits forms, there's no reason, unless I need specific chat about it, there's no real reason to have a fast and furious collaborated effort around these submitted benefit forms, right? Because an employee has completed a form, and it's submitted to this library. That's not going to go through an edit process, right? That's going to be stored for reference. But maybe my benefits team wants to be able to access it. I don't have a benefits team, so I'm just going to use this Florida General. Yeah, that's what we'll do. I can absolutely still expand out the site architecture to have libraries for reference material, content that doesn't go through a lot of edits. But if I still want to get to it, just use your tab. Use that document library. You could do this a few different ways. Let's see if this even knows about, oh, we'll use the HR team. Went back to thinking about Florida. Completed benefits forms. So tabs still don't know to name the tab after the name of the library. So I still have to name it. Otherwise, you'll just have random document library tabs. So I can tab to it. By default, it will let everybody know you've done it, which I like. I like people to know I'm doing stuff. And here's that completed benefits form from that other site. So you would want to make sure that all of the Florida HR folks have permission to that library since it lives in a different site. But go ahead and organize your content appropriately. You could even, if you wanted to, use files as the Dropbox for the channel. And once stuff is reviewed, move it to the library where it needs to go once it's done with its collaborative editing process. Files shines when you use that for that collaborative effort, but once it's static content, put it in its official home. That may end up being on a communication site, right? Hey, we've got a policy, it needs to go through revisions. Maybe we're working on our hybrid workplace policy for when our offices start opening up. Work on it in your team and then publish it, probably as a PDF, out to the communication site where the policies and procedures live. So libraries still should be a very active part of your site architecture, absolutely. But the communication and the collaboration about what we're working together as a team will happen in the channels. And that's what's really, really cool about this. Let's see, I think that should be my next slide. It's not. I'm going to skip ahead and then we'll go back. Because since a channel is a folder, folders traditionally on our file shares, right, where were our primary pieces of organization. If I had a folder for it in the old days, now I have a channel for it inside of Teams. So my channels are organizing both my content and the communication around it. This is a screenshot from a demo that I have in my actual Pate group work thing, so I won't go there live. And honestly, as a consultant, everything I do is project-based, so the teams define themselves very easily. If I have a client, this was Project Excelsior, you get your general channel where you just talk about things that generally relate to the whole customer. Then I have a channel for deployment planning, because typically one of the first things I do with a customer is deployment planning and strategy workshops. And we sit down, we have conversations about what your primary departments do, what a day in the life of HR, a day in the life of engineering, a day in the life of security. What do you need? How does this work? What hurts? What's hard? What's great? How can we help? How will 365 make your life better? If I need to talk to my team about deployment planning for this customer, I'm going to do it in the deployment planning channel. When I've got my recommendation written up and the architecture diagram completed, I'm going to upload that to the deployment planning channel, right? I would never go to the Power App Build channel to talk about deployment planning or migration, right? The channels organize our conversation about what we do and the content that we're doing. Human resources. Let's go back to Florida. What does our Florida team do for HR? Do they need a channel where they, as all of Florida, can talk about new hires and onboarding, Florida state laws for, I don't know, whatever Florida state laws would be for employees, Florida policies and procedures, bulletins and announcements for changes in how processes and procedures are going to be. If you define the channel by what you do, the organization starts to work out really well. So if I know I need to go get a document, I know exactly which channel to go get it from. And we still have search, right? Sometimes lines blur. Search can absolutely help when we're not sure where we need to go. And since we're doing it inside of Teams, it starts to enhance the teamwork that's going on around us. Have you ever noticed that it's just a lot easier to jump into a conversation in a channel in Teams, in chat, than it is to reply to one more message and one more long email thread? I'm not likely to jump in and be the 15th reply all in a long email conversation unless somebody's actually calling me out and asking me a question. But in Teams, voice is inviting me to be there and to participate. In email, we tend to just go to the same people over and over and over again. Whereas if I go put that message in the channel for my whole team, everybody's in the loop. I'm not forgetting and leaving somebody off an email thread, right? It's happening all there for everybody to see. Not only am I keeping my whole team updated appropriately, but now I've got the benefit of everyone on the team being able to respond, to offer some advice, to jump in or say, hey, I could do that. Whereas if I just do an email to the 2 or 3 people I talk to the most, I'm missing out on everybody else's input. And now, like we just said, my files are going to be organized in those channels rather than trying to hunt through and find where that little bitty paperclip really is in a long email thread from 6 weeks ago. So it definitely starts to promote and elevate teamwork. One thing seen often is teams tends to dedicate a separate channel to each project instead of a dedicated team for each project. We tell them you can only have 200 total channels, so they eventually run into that limit. I do run into those conversations. It's like I used to call it boxing with SharePoint. Now it's kind of like boxing with Teams. Which way do I need to bob and weave to get this set up the way that makes the most sense for the customer, for the client? Jason, I like the concept of doing a team per customer. Let me see. Separate channels to each project. Instead, yeah, I would do a team for that project, or that for us, it's a customer, right? What's the big defining unit for you? Build the team around that, and then use the channels for the processes that support that overarching identification. For me, it's my customer. And then I do a channel per scope of work for the customer. I've got some folks that I'm working with over in the UK that are kind of struggling with adapting a very deep folder process for customer projects. They would just create a folder, and in that folder, they had all these different things. I want to flip that to a site. Instead of a customer project nested folder situation, I want to go to a customer project team. And they want teams because they want to be able to collaborate, right? Have the conversation and the work together. I think Teams is the perfect solution for that. So it'd be a team/site per customer, and then all the stuff they do would live in the channels. And if they hit a 200 limit project for one customer, way to go, right? You're making that customer happy. You're doing good work for that customer. So maybe in a year you need customer project 2. I don't know. Let's talk a little bit about private channels. Not too much longer. I'm going to have to expand this slide to private or shared channels. But we talked a little bit earlier about folks running into the situation we create a team and then all the channels in it become private channels. But then you can't use all the team goodies like your planner plan and your OneNote notebook, and you've lost the collaborative side of it. So if you're in the team, you're on the team. When I create a private channel, basically I'm saying, okay, team, this is stuff that you're not part of. So would it make sense for every channel to be private? So if you're going down this road, or if you're living in this world right now and you're trying to figure out, well, when the heck am I supposed to use private channels? How does it make sense? What do I need to do? Ask yourself a couple of questions and talk through, have the conversation. So you've got your stuff. We're going to hold it in our hands. I'm looking at this stuff, and I think it needs to go in my project team. And I'm having to ask myself the question, all the people that need to see this content, are they all part of the same team? And is it a breach of security if everyone on the team sees this content? All right, let's talk through it. Are they all on the same team? Yeah, I've already got a team out there. Everybody that needs to see it is there, plus some people. But it's really not a big deal if those other people do see it. The whole team can see it. It's not a breach of security. I would not worry about a private channel if it's not a breach of security for everyone in your existing team to see the content. Sometimes we create private channels because, well, I've got all these channels already. And honestly, Ohio doesn't care about what Alabama's talking about. So I'll just make them all private channels so people don't get overwhelmed with notifications. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're making it harder than it has to be. If I'm on Ohio and I don't really care what Alabama's talking about, I can just hide that channel. I don't delete it. I'm not hiding it for anyone but me. When I hide a channel, it mutes the notifications. If someone in Alabama comes around and mentions me, I'll get that notification. So if they need me, they can say my name and I'll be there. Otherwise, it's like, y'all just talking too much. Just get it out of the way. So you just hide those channels. You can always come back if you want to be nosy and go back and see what's going on. but it helps reduce that overload of notifications. All right. So we're back to looking at our stuff. Okay. Is it cool if everybody in my existing team sees the content? And do I have everybody in the team that needs to see the content? Yeah, security's fine, but I need to bring in some more people. So sometimes we think I'll create that private channel. My whole HR team will be here, and I'm going to bring in some folks from payroll. You can't do that in a private channel. It's limited only to that Microsoft group membership. So if you need to bring new people in, you're either bringing them into your whole team, which may be a bad idea, or we need to create a cross-functional team. We just set up another team and we call it HR Finance or whatever name you want to call it. And then that collaborative effort can happen there. You're like, but Joy, now I'm creating another site in my architecture. I don't need one more site. Well, when you create a private channel, you're getting a whole other site. And you're getting a whole other site that currently is not findable in the admin center. So you're growing your architecture one way or another. Might as well go ahead, just do it as a team. Now you can have multiple channels, multiple areas of organization. And then there's the sort of kind of situation. Are they all on the same team? Is it a breach of security if everyone in the team sees this stuff and is part of the conversation? You're like, well, I mean, they're all in the team, but it's really not cool if everyone in the team sees this content. Some of it's kind of private. I need a cubby hole where management on the team can see this content and talk about it, but not everybody else. That's your private channel sweet spot. Where's my stuff? So here, private HR channel. If I'm not in that channel, I don't see it. If I am, the padlock reminds me that this is private. It's a safe place to talk about, employee reviews or something. That's the cubby hole. And it absolutely, well, let me go into it, gives you a place to have those private conversations and open in SharePoint. It follows the security best practice model. If something is, I hate to use the word special because it sounds sarcastic, but if something is special enough, sensitive content that it needs its own security best practice is you secure the largest object possible. And in our world, that's a site. See what we got here. One risk to private channels, it's very easy to accidentally add content to the wrong channel. That's a good perspective because it is mixed in with the other channels. Yeah. There might be some ways to fix that. You can't really drag and drop your channels around, I don't think. We'll test that in a second. You could pin it. Maybe you pin your private channels, but you're still going to have several things that you could actually pin it in the wrong private channel. So if I click here on documents, private HR channel is the only thing I see. And in fact, I'm not on my HR team site. I'm on my HR team private HR channel team site. Private channels. Like there's little cues everywhere you look saying you're in a different place. You're in a different place. And if I go and look at the folders that are part of that HR team, right, that private channel is not here. So your content does get spread out a little bit, but it kind of has to because we've said this is sensitive. So there's a lot to think about with the private channels. If you find yourself, and it almost feels like a reflex, creating a lot of private channels inside of your team, I would recommend getting together with that team and say, okay, let's talk, right? Does all this stuff make sense to be in the same team? Is it the same audience? No, that's kind of different. Don't be afraid to create separate teams for that. It does expand your architecture. That's not a bad thing because we're doing it for security purposes. SharePoint sprawl is a real thing. Teams sprawl is a real thing. But when you're doing it intentionally for security, that's a good thing. That's not sprawl. That's planning and architecture. Let's see here. Shelley, how do you feel about uniquely permissioned libraries on team sites to hold private conversation that does not need chat associated with it? Okay, like a secured library where you don't need to have chat and stuff. Content is in private mode before publishing to a public channel. I'm thinking. That's my thinking dance, right? I mean, we have to do it sometimes. I would much rather have granular permissions at a library level than having granular permissions within a library, because it's all about inheritance, right? If you think about permissions like you would genetics, if I create a site and I put things on that site, they're going to inherit features from the site. Security is a feature that objects on my site inherit by default. And when I go break permissions down, I'm increasing management, right? I'm increasing the things I have to do. How do you feel about uniquely permissioned libraries on the team site to hold private content that doesn't need chat when content is in private mode before publishing to a public channel? You could. I'm just, oh, I'm terrified about committing one way or another to this. So I really want to think it through. At that point, I would almost say just go ahead and do the private channel, because it's still another object. It's just a little safer on the security side. Because by default, these 4 members will have permission anytime I create a library. I would have to go in, break the permissions. If we make that our model, well, let's just go ahead and break permissions and create it. We're opening ourselves up to human error. And there's human error in all kinds of areas, even if you do the private channel. I think Jason pointed out, you might drop it into the wrong channel. I think I would prefer to still go the private channel route, have it in another spot, and then do I have anything in my HR private channel? I don't. I don't really want to go to we'll just do it this way. I could still use, seriously? Am I always going to select something with nothing in it? Use the move feature when you're ready to move to, I could go move it then to the appropriate channel from the private channel site. I would still probably tend to do it that way rather than granular permissions. You just kind of flip a coin. Separate library. Admins don't like, we don't, because we've been hurt by them. Don't love private channels as a separate site. I wish a private was just a separate library. See, I could flip that coin a few different ways. I love the fact that I've got a hard and fast security boundary at the site level. And it's just one of those things. I think because I've gone back and I've fixed broken permission problems so many times in the past, it's just having it as 2 separate things. It can just run a little cleaner. But by no means am I going to tell you, oh, it would be wrong to build a separate library and put permissions on it. I'm not going to say that's wrong. It's just not necessarily what I would do. But if you think that would work well for you and your team and you've got a process for it, try it. It's one of those things you can flip the coin a few different ways for SharePoint to get it to work the way you need it to. You've got options. I think I've said that before. Tabs. Tabs are magic. I love tabs. Tabs in Teams are like links in SharePoint, right? If you can browse to it on the internet, you can link to it on a SharePoint site, right? In your navigation, in your quick links, embed, whatever. Well, in Teams, if you can browse to it on the intranet, if it's an app you use, you can tab to it. This is where all kinds of magic happens. Microsoft really is positioning Teams to be here's a long phrase for you, service application delivery platform for Microsoft 365. One-stop shopping is what that means, right? I go to Teams, I talk to my team members, I work on my content, I can put tabs to access content that's maybe static, reference material. I can have my OneNote notebook. Do you ever play the game Email the Spreadsheet? Right? We all got to work on this spreadsheet, and you wait for Bob to get out of it. Bob's out. Well, now Joy's got it, and geez, Joy always takes forever. Oh my gosh, when is it going to be my turn? Right? And this spreadsheet goes around, and we all work on it. You could tab to it, right? put that spreadsheet in the general channel of your team. Through the magic of co-authoring, 25 of us could be in there working on it at the same time. Co-authoring will lock down on a cell-by-cell basis in Excel who can do what where, right? We can truly collaborate real time. And if that Excel spreadsheet is living in a SharePoint library, you've got versioning control around it, because you really don't want Joy doing stuff in your Excel spreadsheets. I will break it. Through the magic of versioning, it's a lot of magic today, right? You can go back and roll back to before Joy touched it, so get rid of all her errors and kind of start over again. So there's lots of ways to leverage it, and it's going to reduce context switching. We used to really talk about multitasking, right? Oh yeah, I do 5 things at once. Sure. Are you doing them as well as you would if you did them one at a time? So the goal, since we've busted the myth of multitasking, the goal now is to reduce context switching. So once we're focused on something, we can maintain that concentration. And if we're just setting teams up where I can click tabs to get to where I need to go, rather than closing down Teams, opening up SharePoint, finding the link, waiting for the site to load, right? Our concentration is maintained better. So that's kind of the goal through doing all these tabs. Now, is there such a thing as too many tabs in a channel? For sure, there absolutely is. In fact, I'm working off of a Surface Hub, I wish, a Surface Pro. And it doesn't take too many channels or tabs in my channel until they start to condense, right, and get the drop down. So you probably want to talk about how many is too many, what makes sense, right? They're pretty flexible, so they can kind of come and go as they need. If you're not using Wiki, for heaven's sake, absolutely remove it. For real, it's permanent. That's okay, I don't mind. Can't go put it back, but you can get to it from another channel. You're fine. Right, so you got some options there. Oh, I said that phrase again. Okay, so let's just take a minute and break down the architecture. So, SharePoint. And I know it kind of feels sometimes like I'm doing a bait and switch because I talk so much about SharePoint in this conversation. But the whole reason we're in Teams is to work on our stuff and to communicate with our team. So we can't work on our stuff without SharePoint since that's where our stuff lives. 20 minutes left. Thank you, Teresa. You can bring an email as a tab by adding the Outlook web app URL in the website app and logging in. Excellent, excellent, Michelle. Yes. Let's talk about that for a second before I break down the architecture. Let's talk about that. Thank you, Michelle. You give me more stuff to talk about. Since Pate Group implemented Teams 4 whole years ago, we have seen about an 85% reduction in internal email. Think about that for a minute. 85% reduction in internal email. Sometimes we still send emails because old habits die hard even 4 years in, right? You're talking about a 20 or 30-year-old habit. But think about reducing your inbox that much because we're bringing those internal conversations to Teams, right? Organized by channel, right? If I'm going to talk to my team about the Acme customers migration plan, I'm going to do that in their team in the migration channel. If I need to ask Stephen a question about migration best practices, I'm going to go to chat to do that. It's all searchable. It's all findable. Now the weight of my inbox is for my external collaboration, right? My customers, my clients, vendors that I work with, partners, MVP emails. We get a lot of those. But that's where the weight of my inbox is now. So it starts to be a delineation of priority. Internal stuff in Teams, client stuff in Outlook. It's nice. I like that clean breakdown of stuff. Okay, there, squirrel. Breaking down the architecture. So we got our SharePoint sites, right? Our communication sites. Typically those are organization-wide. I call them company public. If you have a username and a password, you can get to the stuff that's on those communication sites, right? Submit an incident report for safety. Submit a ticket to the help desk. Go fill out the new insurance forms because it's open enrollment, right? Whatever's going on. Get to the latest and greatest news in the organization. Those are the kind of the cleanest sites that can be created since they don't have the MN365 group. If you have Yammer communities out there, throw those Yammer community web parts on the appropriate communication sites and see the engagement in those communities start to uptick, right? Yammer's fantastic for the want to know content, areas of learning in your organization. Teams is the place for teamwork. So by bringing Yammer into the organization, again, you have a delineation between the weight of notifications. Teams is work. Yammer's maybe a little bit more fun. Team sites, departments, functional business area, project sites, right? That's where the work gets done. Because teams and team sites work together, you're getting that real-time chat, conversation, communication at the same time we're getting our job done, right? We're discussing and conversating all at the same time, and it really facilitates getting work done faster. There's definitely a return on the investment of learning how to utilize Teams. We now have our Yammer communities on the left rail inside of Teams, which is great because one-stop shopping reduces context switching. Viva Connections is rolling out, so now we can have our home site present inside of Teams. It's just getting better and better, bringing everything into one place to work from, but we have access to the entire architecture inside of Teams. It's really exciting. I'm starting to geek out just a little bit. We already talked about that. So this is, and I say we, this is kind of how we at Pate Group propose architecture. This is a little bit more fleshed out than that one really flat line that I had up there earlier. So I'm going to zoom in. So we got our home page, our home site, right? Because it's really more than just that page. There's a lot of information on the home site. Our corporate news that can roll up from the other communication sites in the, actually any news web part in the architecture. Links, self-service items, incident reports, all the stuff that I as an employee search for, look for, need to get to, should have access to. Probably a good way to link to it on the homepage. I'm a huge fan of, pardon me, Waffle, the mega menu, right? So if I need to go to the IT site, I can, but I've got those top 3 things that I usually consume from IT right here. So I'm reducing the click distance of folks. They don't have to go to the site to submit a ticket, right? This keeps your homepage from becoming a link farm. So it's a great way to organize content. Here's human resources. Communication site for everything that I as an employee should be able to get to. Team site for each functional area of human resources. Website. We still can't figure out the benefits of hub sites yet. Oh, okay, we're going to talk about this. Give me just a minute. We will absolutely talk about that, Jason. So here, per functional area, a team site with teams. And then these tabs, man, if they need to get to the policies library, sure, go for it. If they need to tab over to a cross-functional library that they've got with payroll, absolutely, go to it. And then your architecture just starts to build out. I will call out these labels are exactly that. It's just a label. This is not a site collection. This is just identifying that operations, they don't want a communication site, so they're going to have a page on the home site to organize some info, a team site, teams. And then since this was taken from a retail group, they're going to create a hub site, a communication site, and then every store gets a team site and teams. But the hub gives one landing place for everyone that needs access to those various team store sites. They can get there, news can roll up. All the general content that relates to retail stores lives on the hub site. So that way you're not having to duplicate it inside of every team site, right? Each individual team can have a tab to those general resources that live on the hub site. Since this is more of a structured, managed design, how do you handle delegated team creation? Or do you not recommend that? My preference for teams creation, at least to start, is training is critical. Training is so critical. But I recommend utilizing an Azure AD group. It will require a premium license for the people in the group, but lock down the ability to create Microsoft 365 groups to the people in that group, some admins. Create a request process. If you're going to do that, make sure your request process can be turned around very quickly. We don't want people waiting to get their team, right? We want those creative juices flowing. We want the collaboration to happen. But you can have a process to do that. I recommend doing that at first and then going out to your business, training up. Used to we had site collection administrators for our SharePoint site. That's still there. It's just not the same since we're not doing subsites. Find your people, find your champions, train them how to properly create a team, when to create a team, when not to create a team, when to create an additional channel, private channel, soon shared channels. Bring them up to speed on the best practices and how to do it, and then start adding them into that group. Maybe over time you can get rid of that group, but you want some training first. Otherwise, like I recently saw in a client's admin center, Jenny's to-do team. She created a whole team with a SharePoint team site and a planner plan and a OneNote notebook and a group inbox and a shared calendar. I think she just created a task list. Okay, great. I'm glad to see people click buttons. I am thrilled that they're out there exploring. But we're probably going to delete that, move her stuff around, put it where it needs to go. So if you want to get rid of that, I would go with kind of that more delegation process. Another option, let anybody create whatever they want and put a retention on it. 60 days, 90 days, 4 months. You're going to get an email that says, are you still using this? Yes? Cool. No? I'm going to delete it. Get your stuff. So that's an option. Absolutely is an option. 10 minutes left. Okay. Thank you. That's our plan. It helps clarify it as a normal rollout. Yeah. I mean, they're definite. Here's that phrase again. You have options. Do what makes sense. If you're going to have it be a request process, get that turnaround time as low as you possibly can. Because it's nice to not have an IT bottleneck for IT and the users. All right, let's scroll through here. So hubs, Jason. Hubs give you the ability to connect sites when the architecture is getting really, really wide, but the scope is similar. So that would be the idea here. All of the general retail store information would live on the hub site. All those sites are joined to the store hub site, so they get consistent theme. Search scopes at that hub level. So if I'm on the store hub and I search for something, I'm only going to be looking at the sites that are joined to that hub, not the whole organization, because that could get a little bit big. So it scopes in my search. I can have a hub visitors group, and if it's appropriate, you can control it. But that visitors group have read access to all of the sites we say they should within the hub. So it starts to bring in some really good functionality there. I'm going to go ahead and click through, make sure I get all my slides hit, and then I'll kind of show you an example of how hubs can work. Oh, that was the last slide. Well, that was timely. So again, thank you for joining. I'm going to take just a minute to talk about hub sites if you want to hang around for that. If you have any questions at all, chat is here. You can find me at Joy of SharePoint on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook too, I just haven't figured out what to do with Facebook as much, but Twitter is where I live in the social world. Love me some Twitter. Okay, let's talk about hub sites for a second. It's a little out of scope, but why not? We're here to talk and to learn. So I love to hubify my home site and then join what I boringly call my shared services site. So if you're a communication site that's sharing information with all the employees, heck yeah, join it, give people some fast links. Oh, yep, I'll circle back to that in just a second, Sarah. And then here, so I have to edit my navigation, but I can put links to all of my sites that I want to have here in the Hub site. So if I go to Human Resources that's joined to the Joy of SharePoint Hub, I get that consistent navigation across the top. I can also put links to other hubs. I've got a manufacturing hub. If I click, my navigation changes because I've gone to a different hub with its own hub navigation. My theme changes because I've, instead of the teal for SharePoint, I've got manufacturing in gray. But here are all of my manufacturing locations and their sites. For hub site settings, apparently it's got to think about its place in the universe to display that. All right. I can require that there has to be an approval for other sites to join, right? I can have a custom logo for the hub. I've got stuff there. Cancel that. And then site permissions. I have permissions on this site, but I also can set up, I was mentioning, the hub visitors group. So these visitors can have read access to all of these sites, right? So our managers, the C-suite for manufacturing, right, should have the ability to come in and consume the content on these. So I've got that option. Joining a site to a hub does not overwrite the permissions of that site that's being joined in any way whatsoever, but it kind of brings back more of that top level and sub-site feel. It puts arms around that wide architecture. This is a great place for all of the content that anyone in manufacturing should have access to come get this information, see the news, consume this data without having to duplicate it on every blessed one of these sites. That'd be too much to manage, right? So we link them all back to here. Search across sites for work. It's pointing me to the manufacturing hub. And I know my other sites are being represented here because there's La Jolla. That's manufacturing. Most of my stuff's going to be on manufacturing. But it looks at all of the sites that are joined to the hub for that. So I hope that helps. I hope that kind of gives you some ideas of ways you could use some hubs in your organization. Sarah, shared channels. So this, I don't know exactly when that's rolling out, but this will give you the ability to do kind of the opposite of a private channel. You can add a channel into your team and share it with more people instead of only excluding people from your current Office 365 group.
So Joy, we're coming up on time.
Yes.
Great session.
Thank you so much. You guys are always so fun.
So again, we've recorded the session. Getting feedback here. I don't know. This will be posted out on our site. And our winner for the $25 gift card is Sarah. Lambert Sheffield. I'm really goofing the name. I apologize. Hey guys, we appreciate everybody joining. We have the noon speaker, the Microsoft 365 and hybrid workplace. We recommend you go over and take a look and listen in. Don't forget to fill out your survey. And thanks for attending.
And thanks for all the questions and the feedback. This has been great. Everyone have an awesome, awesome day. Thank you.